Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. And now your hosts, Kristy, Wallace, and Maricella, Herrera.
Hello and welcome to the Ellevate podcast. This is your host, Kristy Wallace, with my co-host, Maricella Herrera. Hi, Maricella. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Great.
So are you still riding the vacation vibes?
Well, I think, look, the last month has been a whirlwind, and this month is kind of setting up to be another one. So I'm still on the vacation high, but I'm also on the depths of training for another half marathon high, and I'm going to go away for 6 weeks high that it's coming up to. So I'm kind of like trying to straddle all the things in my life.
Well, Maricella, take care of yourself. Avoid the burnout. I know we started talking about this during our conversation on last week's podcast, and I wanted to touch on it some more because burnout has been coming up a lot in the conversations within the Ellevate community. As I mentioned, Deloitte recently came out with a report that working women are facing alarmingly high levels of burnout despite shifting work arrangements and a rise in hybrid working. Almost 60% of women who work in hybrid environments feel that they've been excluded from important meetings, and a majority of respondents continue to experience harassment or non-inclusive behaviors at work, but few of these behaviors are reported to employers. And so it's this whole combination of being in this workplace where you feel like you're being excluded, you're feeling harassment, you're feeling like you have to navigate this time of shifting work arrangements and hybrid working, to be present, to lead your teams, to lead your company. And it all is an increasing amount of pressure and stress and work that can very easily lead to burnout.
Yeah, and about that report, which I was reading about too, is startling. About 94% of women are saying they are burnt out, which is, incredible. How far and wide this is coming. 53% say their stress levels are higher than they were a year ago. 46 feel burned out. What was the 94 about?
Yeah, it's something that I encourage our listeners to talk about this. I know it's sometimes hard to have these conversations, but talk to your peers, talk to your personal board of advisors, your support network to get that type of support, and also to figure out ways to navigate this and to combat burnout. Please note that the Ellevate community is always here for you. We host weekly roundtables that are aimed at not just providing actionable tips, but going into smaller spaces where we can really get to know each other better, to build networks and community, and to share advice and real life experiences that help us all navigate these times as women in the workplace. I read recently, and Maricella, I shared this with you, but so in terms of burnout, I think about this quite a bit as a CEO and a leader. And any of us who are leading teams and managing P&Ls, trying to navigate these times, it's been really hard. And there was an article on Fortune.com by this author, Jeff Colvin, who talked about CEOs and advisors who are fundamentally changing corporate leadership as a result of what they've gone through over these past 2 years. And the quote states that for many CEOs, the last 2 years were the most demanding, most disorienting, most exhausting experience of their careers, and for some, the most frightening. Yet history suggests it's just possible that they may someday remember it with gratitude. The past 2 years have been a classic crucible experience. It has been painful, and it has forced CEOs to look into themselves more deeply than most people ever do. It has transformed them. Few people seek out a crucible experience, but those who go through one almost always conclude much later, looking back, that it changed them for the better. And in light of burnout, I bring this up because going through that experience, and I feel in many ways that's a great way to sum up how I've felt the past couple of years, it is a lot. It's a lot emotionally, it's a lot of stress. It's a lot on you in terms of, how you best show up for your company, for your customers, how you, navigate this time, and you fundamentally change as a leader. And that can easily lead to burnout. It's putting a lot on you. And so I just do encourage everyone, whether you are an individual contributor, a team of one, leading a company of thousands, to take that time for yourself. And I do hope you'll join us in an Ellevate Roundtable to continue these conversations more deeply.
Yeah. And I mean, what you read it to me, like we talked about it yesterday, and it stuck with me. And I kept thinking about it because I feel like definitely it's that way for leaders, but I think it's going to be that way for every single person. Like, we faced collective trauma for the last 2 years. We faced things that we never thought we would have to. And it is a hard experience, but maybe looking back, we'll all be a little better because of it. And one thing that's important is, and I keep thinking about this too. I actually talked about this at an event earlier this week. We talk a lot about empathy and how important that is in leadership, but there is such a thing as empathy burnout. So yes, it's important. And I will 100% say that the best leaders are those that have developed empathy, because you can develop it. It's not something you're just, you're not born with it necessarily. Some people are, but it's a muscle. You can develop it. But yet you have to also develop the self-awareness and self-care so that you don't crash into an empathy burnout state, which is just going to hurt you mentally, emotionally, and physically. So take care of yourself.
Yes, take care of yourself. I couldn't have said it better myself, Maricella. Well, now let's get to our conversation with today's guest, Madeline Schwarz, who is a strategic communication advisor and corporate trainer who helps individuals and teams communicate with confidence so that they can reduce conflict, increase creative output, and re-energize teams. She's helped hundreds of professionals speak clearly and concisely and work with organizations such as MasterCard, Etsy, and the Jewish Museum. Now let's get to my conversation with Madeline. Hello, Madeline. Welcome to the Ellevate podcast.
Hello. It's so nice to be here, Kristy.
So I wanted to share with our listeners, you and I first met. So you are a member of the Ellevate network of our community in New York City, and you and I first met at an event. I want to say an in-person event, and I want to say maybe it was the beginning of 2019. I remember it was the beginning of the year, and I tell this story because we just connected. At least I felt like we connected and really hit it off, and it just goes to show the power of going out there, meeting new people, and the beauty of the relationships that come from that, and how they weave throughout our lives and our work and impact us in different ways. So I just wanted to recognize Madeline. You've been such a great ally and friend over the past couple of years, particularly as we've both struggling with kids in the New York City school system and all of that great stuff and COVID. But it's pretty magical and beautiful, the ways that we are able to form relationships. And we're going to talk a lot about that today, too.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that it has been wonderful to have this, to really get to know you, because I had been to a number of events where I had seen you speak. And then when we formally met, we did just connect. And it's been great to have other parents with kids in school in New York City and who were suffering through Zoom school last year to turn to and rely on during the pandemic.
Yeah, it's this aspect of relationships that we form, and I just talk about networking so much, and it's oftentimes framed as this kind of dirty thing and transactional, and you only do it if you need something, and that's not true at all. It's really finding connections with people that have shared interests or values, and it does weave within many aspects of your life. And, how do we show up as, for us as working caregivers and as, advocates for change and as professionals. And we're able to keep, supporting each other in many different ways. So I encourage everyone who's listening, think about those individuals in your life and maybe give them a shout out in your own way to acknowledge them. We don't do that enough. But keep building those relationships. You never know where that magic will happen and that lasting relationship will be formed. And it's an important practice that we just do every day, especially as we head back into some more opportunities to connect with others. Madeline, let's get started just learning more about you and your story. Could you share that with our listeners today?
Sure. So what I love about what I do now is that I get to help people tell stories and tell their stories. And I've been telling stories my entire career, but in very different formats. I started my career in book publishing, where I was a publicist and helped get books and authors placed in major media. And then from there, I went back to school, I got another degree, and then I went to work in retail design and experiential marketing. And there, I really learned the importance of being able to get a message across in seconds, because the work that I did and that the team I was on did what really determined whether or not people came into the store back when there was more physical brick and mortar stores. And I take all of those skills into what I do now, which is helping people get their message across clearly and tell more compelling stories.
Storytelling is so important. What does that mean to you? And why are you so passionate about this?
Yeah, well, when I worked with creative teams for so long, and, first I was a designer, and then I moved over into more of the project management and account management roles. And what I saw was that the people who were great at one part of their jobs, who were amazing at creative problem solving, weren't always good at being able to explain their ideas and sell their work to other people. And it was the downfall of so many projects. And I really saw the importance of being able to tell stories and connect the dots for people about how the work that you're doing is relevant to the audience that you're talking to.
It is, and I've found, for me and the work at Ellevate, obviously we are big champions for more quality in the workplace and in the world. And, there's tons of data and tons of stats and information about why this matters and how it helps your business and all of that great stuff. But it's the stories that change hearts and minds. It's the stories that connect, like you said, with your customer and with the community. And it really, I think, helps to put all of us into someone else's shoes in a way that we can really identify and understand what they've gone through or what their experience is or what they're looking for. So it's a pretty special gift to be able to really master that storytelling.
And it's what allows people to express themselves. And another part of my own personal story is that I used to be terrified of speaking in public. And I was always good at connecting with people one-on-one, one-on-two, one-on-three. Anything more than that really left me with a lot of anxiety, and getting on the other side of that fear and really learning that communication is just a skill. It is something that you can learn, like baseball or knitting or anything else that you have picked up throughout your life. And that was such a powerful turning point in my both professional life and my personal life.
Well, talk to me more about that, because it is a skill, but one that I feel like there's some intentionality needed to really be able to evolve.
Yes, I would agree. It does require being intentional. And just like those other things that I mentioned, like if you've ever learned to play a sport or an instrument, let's say I was a clarinet player as a kid and I also played tennis, both of those things required a lot of practice. And that's also one of the keys to building your skills as a communicator is to practice. And it helps to know how to practice.
How do you practice?
Yeah, well, for me, one of the things that I really love to do in my work is to find more fun and playful ways to practice. So one of the number one things that I hear from my clients is they don't practice because they don't have time. Or they don't practice because their practice in the past hasn't helped. And so what I do is give people ways to incorporate practice into the things that they are already doing, as opposed to reserving an hour or 30 minutes to cram before they are going to give a presentation or walk into a meeting. And, one of my favorite time-saving hacks to do that is to practice while you're commuting. And, this certainly changed during the pandemic when commuting came to a halt for so many people. But it's something that I would practice on the subway. I tell people to practice if they're driving their car. So if they are driving to work, driving to the grocery store, driving their kids to school, let's say, that is a place to work out your ideas and get used to saying the words out loud about your topic and the message that you want to get across to people.
Yeah, I love that advice because we oftentimes see a new task or something else we have to do as stacked on top of others, in the sense of, okay, if I have 3 things that'll take me 10 minutes, now I've got a half an hour of work. But that type of integration of, all right, I'm already commuting, so how do I make it more impactful or maximize that time is a great way to remove some of those barriers, particularly around time. But what about, like, as you're talking about practicing your story, and you mentioned I do public speaking, is it just practicing in your head, like going through it in your head?
No, the biggest thing that makes a difference is to practice out loud. That is key. And that's whether you're going to go speak on stage, whether you are presenting at a meeting, or just preparing for a one-on-one conversation with a teammate. Practicing out loud and finding the words ahead of time is going to help you be able to articulate it more clearly, more quickly, and more smoothly when you are then in a situation where there might be more pressure and you feel more nervous.
Yeah, it is important to say it out loud. Do you think having a buddy to practice with is important?
I think having a buddy is a great way to do it if you have a buddy to practice for. In this era of smartphones, you can also practice by recording yourself or turning on voice memo. So let's say you're taking a walk. If you take a walk at the beginning of your day or after work, you can just put in your headphones and record yourself on your phone. And so should you not have a buddy, that's another way to do it. Or even to, let's say you live alone, practice for the pictures on the wall. Like, tape up some pictures from magazines, like create an audience for yourself so that you can simulate that experience of having to talk to other people.
That is such great advice. I want to take a step back and talk about communicating, because communicating is something I think is so underrated, right? I mean, when we talk about communicating, there's verbal, there's nonverbal cues, and all of this certainly comes into play if you're public speaking or you're presenting in front of a team, or even having, a one-on-one conversation with someone. But it's the full shebang of, facial expressions and hands and in verbal, but then I liken communication to being similar to love languages. When we all communicate in a style that resonates with us and we feel like we're being communicated back to well in a style that resonates with us. But oftentimes there's disconnects because, the power of diversity is we're communicating in different ways. Someone might be more direct or someone might be more verbose. And do you have thoughts on that? Do you feel the same way?
Yes. And it's funny because I'm currently reading Adam Grant's book, Think Again. And I don't know if you've read it, but there's a section about negotiating and difficult conversations. And I just love the way he framed it, which is to not think about those situations as a war, but to think about them as a dance that hasn't been choreographed yet, and that your partner and you have different steps in mind.
Yeah.
And I just love that analogy because, in a dance, you can, even if you are doing something unscripted, you can do a little bit of planning in advance. Like what I always tell clients when they are prepping for presentations, often the thing they're most nervous about is the Q&A and the part that they can't plan for. But what I share with them is that you really can plan for it. You can anticipate some of the questions that might be asked, and you can come up with answers for the questions that you hope don't get asked. And when you prepare for those in advance and have ideas about how you are going to answer those, it really helps with being able to articulate your ideas clearly and be more confident, even when pressure and nerves are high.
Yeah. I mean, any difficult situation, and Q&A isn't necessarily difficult, but like you said, many people feel, that is the hardest part of it. It's always easier if you just prepare.
Yes. And, going back to what you had asked about like different preferences and different styles for communication, as an introvert, one of the things that I am often thinking about is how to make communication more inclusive of introverts and the quieter people in the room, whether that room be in person or whether that be a virtual room.
Well, and what are some of the ways that you do that?
Well, this requires being really intentional and thinking purposefully about how you can balance out communication. And I think it helps to have frameworks here, but to help people both establish some guidelines, some rules of engagement for communication. So, for instance, one thing that I really love to share with leaders, with people who are facilitating meetings, is a code of conduct, if you will, called 1, 2, 3, and me. So after you speak, you wait for 3 more people to chime in before you jump in again. And if you share that with a team, it gives the whole group a way to not only monitor themselves, but to also monitor each other and remember to wait and pause. It gets people used to creating those pauses where some of the quieter people might jump in if there were just space.
That advice is key, and particularly, I mean, in all environments, but I think in a virtual environment as well, where some of the other cues that someone wants to jump in and say something or aren't always evident, or maybe, others are less comfortable in that, Zoom room speaking up. So that's really practical advice. I know you've done a lot around your comms framework. We've been talking about it here and there in this conversation so far, but let's go deeper. I mean, what is it, and how did you really architect this to better serve us in terms of communication?
So comms is a 5-part framework, 5 skills that can help you move past anxiety, make better connections, and be more intentional in your communication. And what it stands for is curiosity, asking questions, listening, mindset, and stories. And I first developed this as a framework to use to teach people how to be more effective, intentional networkers, and how to make networking more fun. Because, as you mentioned at the top, so often people think of it as a dirty word. And that's where the mindset piece comes into play. But they're really just the 5 skills that I find I use with my clients when we're talking about communication in all settings. And it starts with curiosity, because curiosity is the key to creativity. And Judd Brewer, who's a neuroscientist and a mindfulness expert, he talks about how curiosity is the skill that can get you out of anxiety and into wonder. And it's also something that you can use really strategically to spark connections with other people. And so I love to share with people how, years ago when I started my business, I used to wear black to networking events. Like black, I feel like was, maybe still is, the unofficial color of New York City. And then one time I went to an event and I was wearing this really bright printed dress, and something surprising happened. Like all night, people came up to talk to me and they complimented me on my dress and we started conversations. And I just realized that it was such an easy way to spark conversation and invite people to talk to you. And so for anyone who has a little bit of social anxiety, or maybe right now is nervous about returning to networking events and meeting strangers again, wearing something colorful or something unusual that stands out is really a great way to just signal to people that you want to talk to them.
I used to have this like amazing green coat that actually my friends got me for a birthday. It was a really kind gift, and I loved wearing it because everyone always commented on it, and not so that I didn't love it because I loved to, people telling me I look great or they liked my coat, but it was a great connection with people. It was an easy entry point to that conversation, just like you're saying. Are there other kind of easy entry points, particularly if we're someone who, I'll be honest, like walking into an event where I don't know people particularly and just starting up a conversation feels very intimidating to me. And I try to think of like, what is a question I could ask someone to get started? But do you have other advice for how to approach that type of situation?
Yeah. Well, asking questions is a great skill. I think so often people get caught up in this idea of needing to have a really perfect pitch, like the perfect 30-second pitch to go to a networking event. And I don't believe that. I think the skill of asking questions and being a good listener can really serve you well in these situations. And so one of my favorite openers at an event is to just ask people what brought you to this event. Like that always spurs a conversation. And, if you think about the first thing I mentioned, curiosity, your level of curiosity can inform the questions that you ask. So another question that I've been asking lately is, what hobbies have you picked up during the pandemic? And another one is, what do you love about your job? And I prefer that question so much more to what do you do? Because it gets people to think about the most interesting part of their job. And, I'm also sensitive to the fact that you might meet people at an event who don't have a job. And if you ask them what they love about what they do, it gives people a a wider opportunity to answer that question instead of saying, oh, I'm looking for a job. They can just talk about what's interesting to them about the type of work that they want to do.
I think it's an important reframing of the professional landscape in general as well, right? I mean, are you defined by your name? We are defined by our names, but your, title and company and rank, or are you defined by the type of work you do and, why that inspires you and what you like about it? And it's just like a more human-driven way of getting to know someone.
Yeah, and it's a much more interesting way of starting conversations if you share things that aren't on your resume. And so don't be afraid to share something a little bit personal, because that's what can spark a connection, and connections can then lead to the things that, might make you show up to an event in the first place if you are looking for a job, let's say. But I always I try to reframe for people that, instead of making getting a job, selling something, or meeting clients the goal, make it, think of those as byproducts of networking as opposed to the starting place. So first, start with being there to meet interesting people.
Yeah. Yes. You just recently went to an in-person event. What was that like for you?
For me, it was actually really exciting because it had been so long, like 2 years since I had been to an event, and it gave me a reason to leave the house fully dressed with shoes on, which was exciting, pull out one of the outfits that's just been lonely in my closet. And it helped to be going to a place where I knew the people hosting the event, and it's a space that I have been to many times. So I knew going into it that there would be familiar faces there. And I do think that can really help when you're intentional about where you spend your time. And if you invest your time in one or two particular groups, it allows you to really form deeper connections and deeper friendships. And then you're not always walking into a room full of strangers, which makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. And I had a similar experience. I went to my first in-person event, and it was a dinner. And yeah, I mean, similarly, I'll be totally transparent. I was feeling all the feels. I mean, I first got in and I just felt like amazing. I'm like, all right, I'm back in the game. I'm out there. I'm meeting people. This is great. And then I realized there was a ton of people there that I knew, but hadn't necessarily stayed in close touch with over the past couple of years, people that I would see at in-person events pre-pandemic. And so that was like really great, but then also a little bit, for me, made me like a bit anxious, because it reminds me of all the people I had lost touch with and, that I had socialized with and hadn't been seeing. And then by the end of the evening, I think I just hit my introvert limit of the energy I was putting out there in these, because for me, I greatly value and appreciate human connection, but it does drain me. It takes stuff out of me. And so I set boundaries and my limits where I listened to my body, and I knew, okay, this has been great. I haven't talked to everyone I want to talk to, but I'm going to leave now and go home. And then we're just going to follow up with everyone tomorrow. And you mentioned you love the one-on-one connections, and I do as well. So it was, overall, it was just great to be out there and to see everyone. But I think it goes to show how important these connections are, setting boundaries, and then knowing that building the relationships doesn't always have to happen in that one event. But we can find many ways to stay connected, especially, moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. As a fellow introvert, I do enjoy going to events, meeting people. I thrive on human connection. in smaller environments. But I just think about how, I too need time to recover afterward. So going to an event after so long was really exciting, but then I came home and spent the rest of the day working quietly by myself. And, what you were talking about really made me think of one of the other skills, or really two of the other skills in the comms framework, which is one, listening, which I think of as twofold, both, how you listen to other people. So when you ask questions and really giving them the gift of your attention and listening, but also listening to yourself, right? So you talked about listening to your own body and knowing that you had hit your limit there. And then the other thing that I heard you talking about is really what I would describe as mindset, and the mindset of connecting, or the mindset that you want to be in for successful communication, which is to be open and curious and intentional. And so whenever I'm feeling nervous about going to an event, because I've certainly experienced that too, I think about what my goal is for the event. And it's never to get clients, to sell something, to get a new job. I set an intention before every event to meet interesting people. That's it. Just to go to an event and meet interesting people. And it never fails that I meet interesting people. And making that the goal allows a lot of other things to happen in between. Like you can eat some sweaty cheese, you can exchange awkward chit chat, but none of it needs to keep you from meeting that goal of just making some new, interesting connections. And I tell people to embrace the awkward. So humans can be awkward sometimes. And when you normalize that as part of the experience, as opposed to fear it, it again is something that can make this experience of networking and talking to strangers or speaking in a public setting a lot less scary and a lot more fun.
Just the way you said that of meeting interesting people, I physically felt less overwhelmed with that approach, because, yeah, I mean, I don't know. We've been conditioned for so long. You need to go to this networking event so you can make contacts for business development or for career growth or for whatever it's supposed to be. Like, there's always a expectation, either overt or subtle, and but that's, again, back to like what networking is, and we've been conditioned to think there has to be some motive. But if the motive is just to meet interesting people and to connect with other humans, the weight of that interaction and the expectation of that feels so much lighter, because we're just going to meet interesting people, to listen, to learn, to share stories, and to connect. And that sounds like a great day to me.
Exactly. And I was once at an event, it might have even been an Ellevate event, but I sat down next to someone. We started a conversation very quickly, found a connection, and sparked this conversation. And she said to me, I always know that the people who sit down next to me are the people that I'm meant to meet. And I just love that sentiment and have really held on to that over the last few years in this virtual world, where it can be a little more challenging to make connections when there's a screen in between. But, I think about that with like when you're put in a breakout room and maybe you have some anxiety around introducing yourself. If you just think, these are the people who I'm meant to meet, and my job at this event is to figure out why, it gives you a whole different perspective on what you're doing there and how you approach it.
Oh, that's all fantastic. All right, now I want to go out and meet some people. Madeline, I love talking to you. Always a great conversation. I want to get to know you a little bit better and ask you some personal questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So we already know you're an introvert. That's usually one of my questions, but we've covered that ground. So tell me someone you would love to have for dinner. Someone you would love to have as a special guest.
I would love to have dinner either with Adam Grant or Susan Cain or both together.
That would be a fantastic conversation. Do you have any pet peeves?
Definitely. Plastic water bottles, single-use water bottles is one of my biggest pet peeves.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so environmentally, right, from that standpoint, because I also don't like the plastic reusable water bottles either. But I just think water tastes gross in them. So I don't like the single use. And then I'm a big, clean canteen type person.
So am I.
Yeah. It keeps everything cold. It's great.
And they don't make the sound that plastic water bottles make, at least the single-use ones.
Yeah.
Like that crinkly sound, if I never had to hear that again.
Yeah, all my kids have metal reusable water bottles, but the funniest is my son, who's in 7th grade. He's 12, and he gets all the ones that I bring home from events or I get for free. Or like I get for speaking somewhere, whatever it is. And so he's got a bunch of, women empowered, diversity reboot, like all these water bottles he brings to school every day. And I keep telling him he's the luckiest kid. He's living his values every day.
For a while, my son was using a conference water bottle from Ladies Get Paid, and it was hot pink.
Yeah, I know. But, it's a water bottle, and it's, we got to stand with our values. What has been your favorite recent read?
It's so hard to pick one. I reread Eat, Pray, Love over the December holiday break, and I have to say, while I remember enjoying it the first time, I had a whole new appreciation for it at this stage of life and really enjoyed it. And I'm also, this is more than one, but I am so excited to read Eve Rodsky's new book, Unicorn Space, which I got a copy of at the event that I went to this week.
Oh, did you do the playing card exercise?
We didn't. Supply chain challenges prevented any playing cards from being there. But I did start reading the first 15 or 20 pages of the book, and I already know this is a book for me.
Yeah, so Eve made these playing cards, and you kind of go through, and it's about, like, what is your unicorn space? Like, where is that space you're going to be creative? And, what is that aspiration? And I had travel for mine. That's kind of something I'm leaning into in 2022. I think travel always has expanded my mind and different sensory inputs and culture and experiences. And I feel so present when I travel. And so that's going to be my unicorn space this year.
That sounds awesome.
Do you have a self-care practice?
I do. My favorite thing, my non-negotiable, the last maybe 9 months of the pandemic, has been a MILT exercise class that I take 2 nights a week on Zoom at 9:00 at night, and I do it in my pajamas, and then I go to bed, and it is the best thing ever.
I'm so impressed by that. I can't do anything past 6, so good for you. I'm just like a puddle. I'm more of a morning exercise person.
This is a good one to do at night because I always sleep better after I do it. It's a very calm class that you mostly do on the floor.
Yeah, well, that sounds fantastic. That sounds great. And do you have a final thought you want to leave with our listeners here today?
Yes, that communication is a skill that requires practice, and that the best way to improve your craft as a communicator is to experiment.
All right. Well, let's all keep experimenting. And thank you, Madeline, for sharing your passion and insights and story with us. You are a master storyteller, and we appreciate all that we've learned from you here today.
Thank you. It was so nice to talk to you.
Welcome back. I hope you all learned so much from that discussion with Madeline Schwarz. And if you want to continue to have meaningful discussions and learn from peers and others, I encourage you to join one of our upcoming Ellevate Roundtables. You can always find more information on elevatenetwork.com. But coming up, we have our executive roundtable on ending burnout and reclaiming your brilliance. So continuing on this burnout theme across many different career stages, rising leaders will share 3 communication tools to improve employee satisfaction. Also very important as we talk about building a culture of inclusion and belonging and being the manager that you know you can be. Our Entrepreneur Roundtable is going to be sharing information on SEO and Google Analytics, what's working now, get the 411 on these tracking tools that are important for your business and understanding everything from where your traffic is coming from to how it's converting and how you can continue to make improvements to grow your business. The Women Seeking Confidence Roundtable will talk about feeling worthy, which we know many of us struggle with that and that self-doubt and self-worth. So let's be honest and transparent and combat that. And in New York City, our Rising Leaders Roundtable will be sharing tips and insights on designing your career journey. So many important conversations are happening every week within the Ellevate community. And as always, this is a place where we put you first. We're not walking into some webinar or some virtual space where you can check out and just half listen to what's happening or walk away with great intent of taking action and then quickly forgetting about that. No, in the Ellevate Roundtables, it's about giving you real actionable advice, helping you build connections, and learn from others who will hold you accountable. We want in that 1 hour time period for it to be the best use of your time, where you're actively working through how to apply these tips and insights into your own life and career so that we can move forward faster together. So I encourage you to join us at an upcoming roundtable.
Yeah, you won't regret it. It's a great space to get advice, be real with your conversations, and people will tell you straight up what they think you should do and how you should approach some of your goals. So it's very useful, I think.
Now it's time to celebrate our first women making history and breaking the glass ceiling. Jessica Watkins became the first Black woman launched to the International Space Station for an extended mission.
Staten Island Fairy Hawks player Kelsey Whitmore became the first woman to play in an MLB affiliate league in a game against the Charleston Dirty Birds.
I love these names. Jenny Van Sickle became the first Native person and first person of color to serve as president of the city council in Superior, Wisconsin.
Talisa Garcia became the first openly trans woman to star in a Lucasfilm production.
Calandra Green was named the first Black female health officer of Oakland County.
Roxanne Nelson was named Chief People Officer at Falvey Insurance Group, making her the first woman member of the C-suite at the company.
Great. I love these because we're talking about just progress and change across the whole spectrum of the professional space. If it's sports to space, literally space, to elected office and within the C-suite of companies, it's an important time for us to acknowledge that we continue to make strides and that we continue to break down those walls and to create more equitable and inclusive and diverse workplaces. We have so much further to go. I know we all feel that very intimately, but progress is happening, and together we'll see that happen more quickly.
And we love celebrating first. We love celebrating accomplishments and would love to celebrate yours if you want to share them with us. Just, you can send them on social media and tag us at Ellevate NTWK on Twitter, or send them to podcast@ellevatenetwork.com. We'll be sure to give you a shout out because that's what we're here for, to celebrate each other.
And join us next week for my conversation with Sheila Subramanian, who is Vice President and co-founder of Future Forum, a consortium backed by Slack, and the co-author of the forthcoming book, How the Future Works, Leading Flexible Teams to Do the Best Work of Their Lives.
And Sheila will be one of our speakers for Mobilize Women on June 8th. She will be on the panel of Why They Stay, Companies' Role in Employee Wellbeing. She is fantastic, and I can't wait for her to share some of the learnings that this think tank that she's part of are coming up with when it comes to engaging teams for inclusive cultures. Don't forget, Mobilize Women is on June 8th. It's fully virtual. It's free. We're going to have people like Sheila and some other great speakers, full day. And you can register completely free at ellevatenetwork.com/summit.
Thanks so much for listening to Ellevate. If you like what you hear, help a girl out. Subscribe to the Ellevate podcast on iTunes. Give us 5 stars and share your review. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Ellevate NTWK, that's Ellevate Network, and become a member. You can learn all about membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. And to our voiceover artist, Rachel Griesinger. Thanks so much, and join us next week.